Good morning, everyone. My name is Carlos Ibarra, and on behalf of Ibarra del Paso y Gallego and my partners, I welcome you to our roundtable on the legal and business review on COVID-19 in Latin America. Never before had humankind experienced such significant changes in the way of living in just 10 weeks. During this time, every business from every sector has been affected, thereby unfolding two challenges. First, how to deal with the situation while we navigate through it. And secondly, rethinking the business from now on. The legal market itself has not been exempt from its share of the toll. A governmental decree or ruling is issued almost every day, requiring profound legal analysis on what is permitted and what is not, what is essential. And if that were not enough, now we also have errata. Yes, now the government publishes something and 2 hours later, it corrects itself. So, sound with the overflow of rulings, decrees, and communiques, us law firms have overwhelmed clients with brainy client alerts on legal effects, and we have also organized numerous webinars, which this is not, because this is a round table. So we thought that instead of yet another client alert or a legal webinar, it was worth shifting from theory and legal analysis onto practice and real life effects. For this, we assembled a select group of general counsels from 6 international companies of key sectors: pharmaceutical, food, beauty and care, personal care, logistics and digital platforms, real estate, office space and co-sharing, and hospitality and tourism. We are so lucky and thankful for having here with us Juan Pablo Malfavón from Astra, Zéneca, Maurin Pérez de León from Unilever, Francisco Pinilla from Uber Eats, Agustín Ballina from JLL, Tomás Acevedo from Marriott Vacations Worldwide, and Jaime Orvañanos from WeWork. Due to time constraints, there will be no interaction with the audience during this roundtable. Yet, you'll be able to send your questions and comments by email. The supporting presentation, Latin America Comparative Law and Business Analysis, and the discussion will be available on our website. Finally, the opinions and comments by the participating counsels do not represent the position or an official statement by their companies. With that being said, we can get started with executory contracts and the effects on real estate related contracts. Most jurisdictions embrace the concepts of interruption of operations or suspension of performance of obligations due to force majeure or acts of God. In some cases, business interruption insurance can kick in. In other cases, like Mexico City and 11 other jurisdictions throughout the Mexican Republic, there's a theory of enforceability by which a tenant or a contract party can appear before a judge in order to adjust the obligations that have become more burdensome in light of unpredictable situations that are not attributable to one of the parties. Nonetheless, the judiciary, the courts are closed now. So companies have struggled on how to deal with these situations, when to ask tenants to continue paying, on where or when are tenants allowed to stop payment of rent, and important decisions on the readjustment and replanning of budgets. For getting started with our panel, I would like the insight of Agustín Ballina from real estate advisory and brokerage international firm JLL.
It was agreed between the parties in regard to the force majeure, and in the event that the parties did not agree anything in regard to this matter, it is important to analyze if the law foresees the force majeure scenario in order to dimension the impact. For example, on the lease agreement, it is foreseen in the civil code that if due to the force majeure event, tenant is totally impaired to use the lease property, then the amounts to be paid as lease payments will not be generated while the impairment prevails. If the impairment to use the property is partial, this will be determined by a third witness party or expert. Tenant will be entitled to request a property reduction of the lease amounts, but in both cases, if the impairment lasts for more than 2 months, the parties may rescind the agreement. And it is important to mention that for lease agreements, these provisions cannot be waived. Therefore, any waive in violation of the aforementioned can be null or void. And it is fundamental that all the parties continue to fulfill its obligations as long as there is no document to demonstrate that any of the foregoing scenarios apply to the specific case that applies to them. And it is important to mention also that even if there from the circumstances mentioned before, there are many elements to allege a force majeure event, my suggestion is to avoid acting unilaterally and rather reach an agreement solution with the other party to avoid judicial controversies. Likewise, we recommend seeking legal advisory before implementing any measure in particular cases. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, co-office space or shared office space by WeWork became quite innovative a few years ago and certainly reshaped the industry of office space and interior design. Jaime Orvañanos, what is your insight on force majeure, business interruption, and acts of God?
Thank you, Carlos. Sorry, I was in mute. Good afternoon, everyone. As I think that as Agustín just mentioned, regarding leases, at least in Mexico, we have two theories. One is the force majeure, and the other one, as you also mentioned, is the unforeseeability provision, which is a theory of improvisation. With respect to the first one, we've seen that a force majeure could be the pandemic, but also we need something else that triggers the part that we are prevented of using the property, and therefore not paying rent to the landlord. So is it fair to say that the pandemic by itself allows the tenant to pay no rent? The answer, it depends. So I'm just going to refer to Mexico, but for example, a retail store in a mall in Mexico City, due to the current government decrees that mandate that all operations must be closed, in this example, we could consider that the pandemic plus the government decrees prevents the restaurant to open, and therefore have an argument before the landlord not to pay rent. But then what happens if this restaurant is delivering food? At the end, they are using the space. So would it change the force majeure? It will. So in order to apply the force majeure clause, I think it's necessary to analyze the particular situation. And basically the essence of it is, or the trigger is, if you can or not use the space. On the other hand, we have this unforeseeability provision, which exists in Mexico, whereby according to this theory, contracts of continued performance or subject to a term can be adjusted or even terminated when its performance is impossible due to events that were unforeseen by both parties. So using this example of the restaurant as well, if the restaurant is not closed but can operate due to the, since they are operating in delivery, you can argue or you can use this theory of improvisation, because at the end, of course, the restaurant is going to have a revenue drop down. So basically it will difficult or may be extremely onerous to pay the rent. So by this mechanism, it takes, you can take or request a reduction or determination of the lease. So basically it's like you have two mechanisms, but at the end you have to see case by case. So we have the same case with certain variables, and it depends which path you want to take. And as well as Agustín mentioned, it is worth to before taking any of these actions to engage with the local council. Thank you.
Thank you, Jaime. Few industries have been so affected as the hospitality and tourism one. I would like to know from your perspective, Tomás Acevedo from Marriott Vacations Worldwide, what is your insight on the stay or interruption of executory contracts involved with real estate?
Oh, I have the example of my industry, hospitality, which, as you mentioned, is very hard hit by this. Most of our resorts in Mexico, actually all of our resorts in Mexico are closed now. They're not receiving any guests. They have reduced operations to the bare minimum, basically maintenance, security, and some administrative work. So that, of course, and we're not receiving any guests. So there were many contracts in place for services, for provisions, for security, things of that sort, that basically were affected by this, where we're not requiring the services, we're not being provided services, and all those contracts have had to be amended. We're in the process of working with our local council to start at least temporarily amending those contracts to account for this reduction, for the lack of payment in some of these contracts. And it's as I said, it's a temporary amendment with the hope that things will improve and we'll be able to retake operations. But right now, we have the stoppage of work has required us to look at all our contractual obligations for the resorts and try to amend them as possible. We have had very good relationship with our suppliers and with our vendors, and they understand the situation. They are in the same situation as well, and they want to maintain the business. So we have been lucky in that sense that we are being able to renegotiate those contracts. Some areas for leases, we have leases in Mexico City that had obligations that were due during this pandemic, and we have good relationship with our lessors, and we're being able to amend those leases so that these obligations that were supposed to come due during the pandemic, they don't come due until later on in the year. And again, but these are things that we have to do. We have to look at every contract that we have and every obligation and account for it, and make sure that it accounts for the unexpected situation that the pandemic represents.
Thank you very much to the three of you. I now defer to my partner, Adrián del Paso, to address consumer distribution and supply.
Thank you, Carlos. My name, as Carlos said, is Adrián del Paso. I lead the environmental, regulatory, and life sciences practices of the firm. And well, just to speak about a different topic, which is consumer distribution and supply chain, I would start by saying that, of course, as it has been said, we are experiencing unprecedented times due to COVID-19. This has had a significant influence on how we deal with and apply the law. And of course, along with this, how do we deal with specific scenarios as lawyers? One of the arenas that has shown an important impact these days is, of course, consumer distribution and supply chain, in which industries have had to, if not reinvent themselves as such, at least deal with significant hurdles to adapt to the current times towards achieving their corporate purpose in general, which is to keep the business moving forward. As it has been briefly mentioned and will be mentioned in detail further, the Mexican federal government has limited activities of the private sector to those considered essential, and consequently restricting all others which are not or do not fall under that category. This is similar to what seems to be the case of the LATAM region in general, which will be further explained. And well, just to tell you a little more, some of the participants that will be speaking in this about this topic are considered essential activities, but they are still struggling and having significant burdens as a result of these restrictions. So I will leave the word now to Maurin Pérez de León, General Counsel of Unilever Mexico and the Caribbean, to speak about what are the actual views and experience regarding this topic in Mexico and the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adrian. At Unilever, as well as other companies, faces important challenges and complexities to maintain all our operations, especially our supply chain activities in Mexico and in the region. And also for giving you a briefing on what is this complexity. In this region, conform Mexico, Central America, and the Caribbean, we have presence in 12 countries. We have more than 9 manufacturing sites all around the region, and we have more than 9,000 employees in the region. So talking about how we are dealing with the COVID pandemic, as we manufacture foods, refreshments, and beauty and personal care products, we are considered as an essential company. But within the legal department, we need to realign our priorities. Because of that, we define three main pillars. The first one is how to protect our employees, the ones that are still working in our manufacturing sites or delivering our products to convenience stores, retail, and pharma chains. Second, how to protect the supply chain activities and also our main providers, because we need to assure the supply of raw materials. And the third one is how to help the business to reinvent it and to readapt all our strategies to the new normal. So in the first pillar, we provide personalized letter to all our employees all around the region to explain why they are still working in the streets. In the second pillar, we provide to our suppliers main arguments, legal arguments, to attend any inspection or request of the authority, because we need to assure their materials and supply. And in the third pillar, this was the most challenging one because the habits of the consumers are changing. People are consuming more foods, but they are stopping to use shampoo and deodorant in daily basis. So we need to readapt our product lines. We need to redeploy our employees to our core products. Thank you.
Thank you, Maurin. Very interesting. I would now leave the word to Juan Pablo Malfavón from AstraZeneca. I think the pharma industry is also dealing with a lot of hurdles right now, especially because health is the main issue within this pandemic. So, Juan Pablo, can you share with us your views on this topic, please?
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you.
As you just mentioned, the pharmaceutical industry is considered one of the essential industries to continue operating. However, we're facing several challenges in terms of distribution and supply the pharmaceutical products and the pharmaceutical industry in general has been affected since the beginning of this pandemic, because one of the main sources in general of pharma industry comes from products from China and India. And as you know, they have issues to export products. For instance, India, what they did was to have limitations in order to provide first products to the local market and then to the export countries. Locally, it was necessary also to maximize, because of that situation, the inventory and distribution of products, again, to ensure complying not only with obligations, but also with our patients. That was necessary for some of the customers. For instance, they wanted to buy more product to the panic sales of the first weeks that we have in this pandemic, and avoid, of course, shortages of product in their inventory. We had to implement all health also considerations provided by the Consejo de Salubridad General, the General Health Council, and sometimes going beyond those guidelines, guidelines that perhaps you all know, of wearing masks in the workplace, establishing distance among employees, among others. Now, in terms of facilities, besides disinfecting warehouses or any other facility, we have to remember that this is an issue, a pandemic related to people, and therefore you need to establish certain protocols of conditions if there is a spread of the virus. If you have to replace your workforce and continue doing business. So those are the kind of things that you need to anticipate in order to ensure continue doing business. Another example was to avoid any restriction of mobility, like the ones established in other countries like Argentina and Costa Rica. And at industry level, we were negotiating with the Seguridad de Pública to ensure having our employees avoid any issue during their commute to the manufacturing facilities. That was one of the things that I believe is important to anticipate as a business in order to avoid any kind of disruption.
Thank you, Juan Pablo. Very interesting as well, and very challenging for sure. Finally, I would just ask Francisco Pinilla from Uber Eats General Counsel, what's his own experience as a disruptive company that actually gets consumers and clients closer to the food industry, to the restaurant industry? What's your actual experience in this topic, Francisco?
Thank you, Adriana, and thanks to the firm for inviting me to this panel. As some of you know, Uber recently decided to terminate approx 3,000 employees, mainly on the customer support part of the business due to the COVID situation. So reality is this crisis is hitting everyone in different ways. Good news, at least in the Uber Eats world, we are seeing the business growing. We are seeing the business helping people. We are seeing the business doing a lot of efforts in order to connect distributors with consumers, in order to connect restaurants that are facing a really bad situation nowadays in the entire region, with different ways of delivering food. However, I would like to share with you something that is really important on how countries can impact industries when they are deciding different things. For example, in the case of alcohol, we have been seeing an important increase of alcohol consumption in the entire region, but Mexico is one of the countries who are imposing the most restricted actions on the alcohol sale. One of the most important arguments governments are using to avoid restricting alcohol in other countries is the fact that people are struggling at home, and at least having this can create some entertainment, some reasons to stay calm. But the real reason behind this is that the sale of alcohol creates important contributions to the health system in most of the countries in the region. And removing that income can create additional issues to the public finances. Also, with this important impact to the restaurant and the industry in general, having restaurants or merchants or stores selling alcohol could create some relief for some of the customers we have within the app. So what other countries are doing, for example, are trying to introduce different blockers to the sale of alcohol. For example, they are restricting the quantity of alcohol a person could obtain in the street, or they are restricting the time during the day when the person can access to alcohol. But in the case of Mexico, some cities are taking a different way of this. And of course, it's creating an impact, not just for Uber Eats. It could create some impacts for the entire industry, from some restaurants that are struggling with the current situation. So having companies like us guys approaching to the regulators and share with them the benefits that certain industries may need with those kind of products flowing around the market is really important. And it's really important, why? Because this kind of products can create the level of recovery we will need in the economy in the coming months. So my message here is this kind of panels, this kind of discussions could go also to the government and some local regulators in order to help them to identify well what are the type of restrictions we need as community, and also how we can leverage on the opportunities for other markets and avoid the impact we are having for some of us.
Thank you, Francisco. I will now leave the word to my partner, Jaime Rodriguez, to speak about labor topics related to the pandemics in the region. So Jaime, please. Thanks.
Thank you, Adrian. Hi, everyone. Well, I'm Jaime Rodriguez. I'm the partner in charge of the labor and employment practice at Ibarra del Paso y Gallego. Well, let me start by telling you that at the beginning of this health contingency, we were all discussing about whether this situation will fall within the health contingency definition, which by statute allows employers to suspend employment relationships with the payment of only the minimum wage to all of its workforce. This discussion, of course, was superseded on March 31st when the health authority defined the crisis as an emergency situation caused by force majeure. This subtlety made a huge difference, because due to this definition, then employers were not able to furlough employment relationships with only the payment of the minimum wage. And they were facing the difficult situation of having to stop their operation and pay the full wages to their employees. Therefore, most companies have developed strategies to protect both the workforce and to secure the continuance of the business. The main resources so far have been home office for all those positions that can work remotely. Also the granting of paid vacations to all employees who are entitled to vacation periods, and this is in lieu of paying salaries. Or also negotiating temporal salary reductions to employees. Most salary reductions so far have been between 10% and 50%, along with a reduction of working hours. It is important to mention that these negotiations have been conducted between employers and employees directly when they are not represented by a labor union, or between employers and the labor unions, in which case those agreements have to be ratified before the labor board, which is working only for set purposes. Also, it is important to mention that it is legally allowed to negotiate employment conditions between employer and employees, even if there is a reduction, as long as the reduction is not below the minimum employment conditions provided by the federal labor law. And unfortunately, these situations have led many companies to start considering workforce reductions, and unfortunately, layoffs have started. It is important to mention that the federal government, as of today, has announced that there have been almost 700,000 job reductions due to this COVID pandemic. This is between March and April this year, so the worst is yet to come. But with that being said, I would like to ask my friend Maurin Pérez de León, General Counsel from Unilever, to tell us about her experience in the industry.
Thank you very much. Despite the challenges, I will start saying that Unilever is a company fully committed with its employees. The security and the health of our employees are our main concern. And as I already mentioned, an important number of our employees are working in the streets in the manufacturing sites to produce all our products and also to delivering them to the convenience stores. So we took some measures. All our employees, those that are working in the street, the ones that are working from home office, and also the employees that are considered as a vulnerable population receive a security kit for protect their health. Also, we installed a call center where the employees could report any health issue. And also, they could report if they are feeling a lot of stress or anxiety. This service is expanded to their families.
Oh.
We also are running sanitization processes in all our sites because we are producing foods and beauty and personal care products. We are also sanitizing our ice cream trucks. And we are providing transportation to all our employees for avoiding using the public transportation. We allow them to use Uber or to use the bus for employees. And on the other hand, as you know, the labor authorities are running this kind of inspections, mainly for review, first of all, if you are an essential company. And second, if you are applying all the hygiene measures. We already received 2 of these inspections, one in our site in Lerma, where we produce foods, and the other one in our ice cream agency in La Paz. Both are closing with a lot of success because our leaders have been received training for answer all these inspections. And we provide them with all the arguments to explain why we are an essential company and all the measures that we are taking all around the territory. Thank you.
Thank you, Maurin. In fact, your industry is a great example of what a company should be doing if they have to work during these pandemic days. Thank you again. Jaime Orvañanos, what can you tell us from your end and your industry?
Hi, Jaime. Thank you very much. What we've seen is that more than ever, the legal department has to be a partner with the business. The current employment alternatives that you just mentioned, it may mark the difference between surviving or bankruptcy from a financial perspective. So it is really important that the legal team make sure that the business has these alternatives, and depending, of course, in the type of industry, to take over the one that suits the best. If I can make a comparison between the US law and the LATAM law, especially Mexico, in the US, there's employment at will contracts that basically allows the employer to terminate the relationship without paying any penalty or severance. Mm-hmm. While in LATAM, or basically in Mexico, you also need to pay a severance that at the end has a huge cost or a high impact in terms of economic. So before terminating employees, I think that the best alternatives would be, and it's something that we've seen, is to reduce salaries. And even though you need the consent of the employee, I think at this moment, whenever you give the option to the employee, if it's terminated or takes salary reduction, temporarily speaking, they will give you the consent because they currently understand it. So I think the main difference is the communication that we give to our employees. Other alternatives, such as you mentioned, furlough, mandatory vacations, reducing working shifts, I think those are other alternatives that will enable the company to go through to these moments and try to avoid the termination of employees. I can tell you that at WeWork as well, we have taken some measures. One of them is the skeleton crews. So in each one of our buildings, we have skeleton crews, and we're operating with a minimum in order to protect also the employees. We have implemented home office. We are also protecting the vulnerable persons according to the current decrees. And we're currently sanitizing and complying with the health and safety processes implemented or recommended by the governments. So basically, I think that these are good options, and it's worth to analyze them in order to help the business go through this tough moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Jaime. And of course, there are the difficult decisions, but as you mentioned, is a difference between continuance and bankruptcy. So it is worth the discussion. So Juan Pablo Malfavón, what can you tell us from your industry as an essential activity?
Of course, and I think it's similar to the other industries. We're facing, for instance, one of the main challenges regarding home office is to establish the working conditions of the employees. You need to establish certain guidelines. For some functions, it's easy to perhaps to work virtually. For instance, as an in-house counsel, I can do most of my work, 95% I can say of my work remotely. This is easy, but for some other functions is not the same. For instance, a sales representative, that they have to be in hospitals, in the street, I mean, the whole day. Is important to establish certain and very specific guidelines. The other one is there are some other labor considerations that you need to also see. For instance, the home office is currently at some point regulated. I believe is vague, the current labor law. We need to go deeper. One of the questions is what happens if there is an accident when you are working at your home. I mean, if there is any I don't know, complaint or about extra hours. We know the authority. We have a protective labor system, and as an employer, you also need to be prepared to answer those kind of questions. I believe in the future, and after this pandemic, we need to go deeper and try to regulate those kind of things, because I believe it's going to be we're going to be facing those kind of issues more often in the future, to avoid those labor risks and continue, of course, doing this and providing any legal advice to our companies.
Thank you, Juan Pablo. And of course, as you mentioned, home office is here to stay, and we are going to see more and more regulations on that end. That's what our feeling. Naturally, there was a discussion in the Senate last year to approve an amendment to the federal labor law on home office, but it was stopped because it was not an important matter at that time, but I think this will be definitely revisited in the near future. So, Tomás Acevedo, what can you share with us as one of the most affected industries in this pandemic?
I can basically mostly summarize what Jaime and Juan Pablo have mentioned. Yes, we have been very affected. We had to, as I mentioned before, we had to close our resorts and send some people to work from home. Those that are needed, they were sent from home with a reduced schedule and reduced hours. Who have been able to renegotiate some of these contracts, to temporarily amend their employment contracts to allow for that. Unfortunately, some other employees have had to be laid off, maintenance employees mostly. And for those employees, well, we are doing our best to offer not only the minimum that they're required, but offer a bonus. Some of these employees have been employees for a very long time, and we want to be able to preserve them when things improve. So we're trying to do good by them. The experience has been good. Most employees have accepted what we have offered, and we trust that we can, once we resume operations, that we can get them all back.
Thank you, Tomás, and thank you all for sharing your comments. And now I'm going to defer to my partner, Carlos Pérez. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Glad to have you with us here. Well, as Jaime said, I'm Carlos Pérez, and I lead the tax and financial areas of the firm. And I want to talk to you about a current issue that most of companies will face worldwide due to this pandemic. That is a lack of liquidity and short of cash to face pending debts and to reboot their business operations after the quarantines dictated by governments are lifted. To do so, companies may turn to financing themselves either by equity injections or debt injections. Examples of equity injections may include capital increases, mergers, and joint ventures for specific purposes. Debt solutions could include corporate finance if a multinational company has sufficient funds to finance its subsidiaries around the world, or if it doesn't, turn to help to buy project and venture finance that can work either as equity or debt injections. Each of these solutions has to be analyzed thoroughly to determine the legal and tax consequences of choosing these solutions. Additionally, market conditions may also be considered to determine the profitability of the solution. Regarding these legal and tax aspects, I want to talk to you very briefly about two aspects. One is the recent amendment to Section 32 of Article 28 of the Income Tax Law that limits the deduction of interest paid. According to this statutory law, any interest paid that exceeds 30% of the adjusted tax utility will not be able to be deducted for tax purposes. This measure may severely impact businesses that really do need to finance themselves to reboot business operations in this pandemic situation. Two of the main aspects of these dispositions are that this disposition only applies for loans that exceed 20 million pesos, and that this amount applies to all the subsidiaries that form part of a multinational group. And secondly, that even though this interest may not be deducted in the tax year they were paid, the provision allows a possibility to deduct them in the 10 following years, as long as the taxpayers comply with all the tax losses regulations that regulate the implementation of tax losses. Finally, and on a brief matter, the federal government has been reluctantly to give any tax incentives general, but at least it has allowed taxpayers to choose a benefit that allows them to refinance or get a deferral of their Social Security contributions up to 48 months, going from monthly interest rates from 1.26% to 1.82%, depending on the time frame. Having said this, and without further ado, I would like to have the opinion of our dear colleagues on these matters. Agustín, Ballina, what would be your input regarding these topics? Agustín, do you hear us?
There we are. I was mute. As you mentioned, one of the benefits that the government has granted is the deferral of the Social Security contribution up to 48 months. The problem I see is that most of the businesses are having a relevant impact on their income, or probably not having any income at all. And the recovery will not be from one day to another. And this recovery will not generate extra income to pay this tax referral. So the companies that are taking this deferral will have to pay it anyways, and plus the regular taxes. And for sure this helps, but probably not enough. We might be covering one hole by making another. I think it's not just with taxes. For example, we are also seeing this in lease agreements in which landlords are offering rent deferrals, and this could generate payment defaults in a short term. Thank you.
Thank you, Agustín. Very interesting. Francisco Pinilla, any thoughts on this?
Thank you, Carlos. My first thought on this is, although we have been working very hard with governments in order to incentivize the creation of formal sectors and having more incentives to have people contributing to the system, it's really important that the governments weigh well on about additional contributions and how this kind of additional contribution may impact consumers, right? For example, now in Mexico, we are seeing the new VAT for platforms. And this is, of course, it was introduced in the last tax reform, and we said at that time, no one can look and say, hey, maybe we'll have a pandemic that could impact the pockets of everyone. But now when we are seeing this situation, this is the kind of contributions we are expecting as consumers. The governments will try to reduce the impact, right? In the case, for example, of VAT platforms, companies like Netflix, Amazon, Ubers, and others will be impacted. However, it's the final consumer who will be paying for that. In our case, for example, it's not even the rider or the eater, is the restaurant itself, is the delivery partner or the driver partner, because they are the ones who are using the technology. In our case, you guys are riders and maybe you are eaters, you are using the delivery service, but you are not using the technology itself. Are the drivers, couriers, and restaurants who are using the technology, and they are the ones who should pay for this VAT. And in the case of restaurants, of course, could create more issues to the ones they are facing now. So hopefully we can create more eco on these kind of messages and having a government that could create some relief. Otherwise, the recovery will be harder.
Of course, good point, good point. The people that need more now to cash are the more affected by these tax reforms. I agree. And finally, Juan Pablo, any insights you may have?
Perhaps only one comment, Carlos. And as you mentioned, unfortunately, in Mexico, we're not having the incentives that you see in other countries. I mean, I think those incentives are important to of course, for the economy in general. And I believe that we need to see the way to at some point to see if you can do something with your losses in the pharmaceutical industry. We can say it's a very healthy industry in terms of a payment of our suppliers and customers. However, with this pandemic situation, we are also facing issues regarding our collection, and we need also to see how, from the tax perspective, what we can do with those kind of losses. I mean, that's the only comment that I have. Unfortunately, again, we need to look for incentives and to see the way to approach authority, because nowadays, besides, of course, the limitations that we have because of the pandemic, it's difficult to have these kind of conversations with the authority.
Thank you, Juan Pablo, and thank you all for your very insightful comments. I think the conclusion is that more is needed from the government on tax issues. Now I will defer the word to my dear partner, Juan Miguel.
Thank you, Carlos. Hello, my name is Juan Miguel Martinez, and I am the partner in charge of the dispute resolution area of the law firm. And first of all, I want to thank to our guests and our audience for their participation. We hope that the information that we discussed today could be somehow helpful in these strange and challenging times. Well, as you know, in many countries around the world exist alternative dispute resolution mechanisms, or simply ADRs. Mexico is no exception, and its legislation foresees the different ADRs, such as the conciliation, arbitration, and mediation. As a consequence of the pandemic situation that we are living today, the Mexican government decided to shut down any jurisdictional activity since March 18 to May 31st for the moment, and with some exceptions. But for this reason, many companies are reasonable concern about the performance of their obligations and the possible strategies dealing with breaches of contracts of their counterparties. On this, we have recommended to our clients different ADRs depending on the special circumstances of each case and their needs. Moreover, we are facing a very specific situation that has affected all of us. This has naturally changed the approach between the parties to a potential conflict and has forced everyone to be more receptive and sensitive about the actual context. And here is where the ADRs have kicked in. At least this has been our experience in the last couple of weeks, working hand in hand with clients and opposing parties in a most efficient and cost-effective way of resolving disputes than ever before. Right now, any of the mentioned ADRs could be a better option than waiting until our courts open again. More so considering that once it happens, they will be overwhelmed with all the new claims that are going to be filed in the next months. So finally, taking in consideration the actual crisis, perhaps Jaime or Francisco would like to share their views and recommendations on this matter. What do you think, Jaime, about this?
Thank you, Juan Miguel. Yes, as you have mentioned, currently the courts, at least in Mexico, are closed. And it's a fact that due to the recent pandemic, lots of companies and individuals are having a hard time to comply with their contractual obligations. And even though usually the business looks for litigation in order to make the counterparty comply with their obligations, and that's what lawyers are for, it's worth to note that as of today and due to the pandemic, this may be the last resource you want to use, due to the fact that the courts are closed. Especially in Mexico, we know that the justice takes a little bit more time, and we really think that we can expect that when we return to normality, whenever that happens, we will have a massive saturation in the court system, which will take several months or years to win our claim, either by collecting payments or preventing us from payment. In our industry, what we are seeing is an increase in pre-litigation, legal notices, particularly what they're looking is not to pay, arguing force majeure, terminating agreements. And the position that we're taking a little bit is to work with the business, to look for options for our clients. And we're using those alternative disputes that you're mentioning. One of them, it's arbitration. And as they say in the States, time is of the essence. So it's worth to use this alternative resolution disputes, arbitration, mediation, conciliation, that can help us reach an agreement within a short time. I think it's worth to note that these are tough moments for everyone, and we may not win all points. So we must be open to all negotiations and help our business areas understand that. Finally, there's a saying that says, it is better a bad arrangement than a good fight. So I think it's worth noticing it and taking into consideration before filing or trying to file a lawsuit. Thank you.
Thank you, Jaime. We agree with your thoughts. And Francisco, would you like to add anything else?
My message is pretty similar on what Jaime comment. Today is more important than ever using alternative dispute resolution mechanisms to solve the issues this pandemic is creating. Of course, I think the great question mark is, we really want to sue someone at this moment that maybe will have no resources to attend even the process, or won't be able to pay afterwards, etc. So using other mechanisms like mediation, conciliation, mutual settlement, even community dispute resolution programs some countries in the region has, will be key. And I think having partners like you, Juan Miguel, that could collaborate in this kind of different approaches will be super important, because on a regular basis, we are more comfortable on having just a formal conciliatory procedure and then go directly to the legal suit. And I think with the time we are facing now and in the coming months, I think we will be seeing the need of having a different approach. and having firms like Ibarra del Paso helping us in different way on how we can create different methods, different way of negotiating and trying to resolve those issues in a very timely, effective way. Otherwise, we will have a lot of lawsuits with no good results a lot.
Thank you, Francisco. We agree with that. And of course, we believe that the negotiation phase is going to be essential in the next years. But right now, I'm going to defer to my partner, Rodrigo de los Rios, for his intervention. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Juan. Hello, everyone. I am Rodrigo de los Rios, partner in charge of the finance and capital market practices at Ibarra del Paso y Gallego. Okay, in line with the topics that my partners have discussed, such as contracts, labor, tax, administrative, and dispute resolution matters, we have conducted a survey about COVID-19 crisis with several fellow law firms, all throughout Latin America. They are the following: Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Dominican Republic, Ecuador, Guatemala, of course, Mexico, Paraguay, and Uruguay. Now, we are showing you the most interesting findings. As you can see in the first chart, most of the countries have early termination of contracts provisions due to force majeure or act of God. The only country that does not have it yet is Ecuador. This chart also shows that business interruption insurance is available in most jurisdictions, other than Bolivia, Chile, Colombia, and Paraguay. We can also see in this chart that some of the countries suspended the judiciary operations. The only country that remained open is Costa Rica. The next chart, thank you. In this chart, we can highlight that all countries perform partial shutdowns with a classification of activities, essential versus not essential. Also, almost all of the countries suspended the administrative branches of the executive. The next chart. Now, let's take a look at the labor regime in this chart. The following countries adjusted salaries and other benefits due to acts of God, force majeure, and business interruption: Argentina, Bolivia, Costa Rica, Dominican Republic, Ecuador, and Uruguay. All others do not. You can also see that all countries reported that the private sector was supported with some kind of tax incentives, deferrals, or abatements, as Carlos Pérez mentioned. Furthermore, the following countries have not yet created an effective economic reaction plan by the public and private sector. They are Argentina, Bolivia, Chile, Colombia, and Mexico. The last slide, please. Finally, we asked our fellow law firms about how much some sectors have been affected with the pandemic in some way or another. As you can see in this last chart, the food and beverage, pharmaceutical, supply chain, and logistic industries seem barely affected, while the consensus regarding real and office real estate, together with tourism, restaurant, entertainment, is that they have taken the hardest hit. Well, this comparative law and business study would not have been possible without the invaluable help of our Latin American allies, whose data appears at the end of this presentation and at our COVID Knowledge Center in our webpage. Thank you very much. Now I present you my partner, Gerardo Gallego.
Thank you, Rodrigo. Hello, everyone. My name is Gerardo Gallego, and I am partner in charge of the M&A and commercial transactions practice. Much has been said about what may be the future for the real estate and retail industries. Theories that seem to be turning into reality regarding how the high costs of land as an already exploited and limited resource will make the direct acquisition of real estate more and more complex to individuals and to non-real estate companies, especially in developed countries and in highly urbanized cities. These theories would probably lead to shared acquisition of real rights and property, as well as to a rise in the use of leased spaces. Legal tendencies, such as crowdfunding, are very likely to increase in the near future. Real estate acquisitions by private and public equity funds will most certainly continue growing exponentially. escalating the land value and consequentially their market share in highly demanded territories. Shared ownership is now a day-to-day alternative for most luxury hospitality destinations and brands. Co-working, co-living, co-traveling, co-transportation, and co-entertainment are trends that seem to be letting private property off the millennials' life wish list. On a very similar and related way, retail appears to be heading dramatically to e-commerce and highly specialized spaces, focusing mainly on the user's complete experience rather than in the size, volume, or availability of products. The extremely easy access to a huge number of products and services through the web and other e-commerce applications will most likely have important repercussions in the retail industry future. To discuss these topics, I now defer to Tomás Acevedo from Marriott Vacations, Jaime Orvañanos from WeWork, and Agustín Ballina from Jones Lang LaSalle. Tomás, could you please share with us your hospitality view on this?
Can you hear me now?
I do.
Okay, I was muted and I could not unmute myself. And I think you've covered pretty much all the important points. I think this pandemic has forced us to think farther into the future than the time that it will last. So I hopefully this pandemic won't last much longer, but it has brought many things to the table. Alternative work arrangements are here to stay. I mean, that's clear. For the time being, distancing is important, and that will affect how we use space. Definitely, some entities, including our own, will have to figure out how to have all these employees working while keeping them apart. That may require part of the workforce to work from home all the time, so that our facilities are not filled with people.
Yeah.
I think that's going to happen. In terms of our industry, the hospitality industry, we depend on other things happening. The travel industry, the airlines have to come back. All the transportation industry have to come back, and we have to convince our owners. We're in the timeshare industry, so we don't depend on seasonal travel. Our guests will travel all throughout the year, but we need to incentivize them to come back, and that's something that's a challenge. I think all of us in this industry are thinking, how are we going to make people want to travel again, to come to our areas? And once we receive them, how can we keep them safe? And that's important. That's what I see. In terms of the real estate industry, we just have to rethink it. I don't think it's going to go. We just have to rethink how to best use real estate, how to best take advantage of the new normal that we have. That's pretty.
Thank you, Tomás. Thank you very much. Jaime, what are your thoughts on the future for the shared way of living and owning property?
Thanks, Gerardo. So I think that, as Tomás mentioned, real estate industry will not be the same as it was. I don't think that it will recover, but it will take all this year or maybe part of the next year of 2021. And the message is clear that we need to adapt to new necessities and the new world. Retail stores will adapt or take more on online sales. Offices may reconsider the fact of having big spaces and having the vast majority or all of their employees working at home. And those things we need to analyze. In our industry, which is the co-working, we've seen that the occupancy of our buildings have reduced due to the fact that the vast majority are working at home. And one example of this, it's all of us. And we expect this to continue at least until the government decrees are being lifted. What we've seen also in terms of this new model for co-working is that the governments are issuing new regulations right now, taking into consideration when we're coming back to work. So one example is in Colombia, that they already issued a decree that refers to social distancing, whereby they are requesting the employers to have a distance of at least 2 meters between desks. Of course, this is going to affect, and we see here an opportunity for co-workings. Why? Companies may not have the space to allocate all their employees or have them currently at home office. And we see a new opportunity for co-working due to our flexibility, the number of locations, and the infrastructure that we may offer to those companies, in order for them also to comply with these new regulations, either to have them to use our spaces in order to comply with these regulations, or even have offer to their current employees co-working locations near their homes to have a space where to work. Because at the end, not everyone can work from home. It's really tough, and I can talk about my case in particular. We see that change. We see a new opportunity, and this is like advertising. If you need office space, please contact me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jaime. Agustín, would you care to comment your thoughts on what is next for the real estate business transactions?
Yes, well, we're all talking about this new normal. Every newspaper or consultant firm has different information every day, because we still don't know how long this will last, how the reentry will be, and the real impact in the different businesses. But for sure, things are not going to be the same. And the impact on real estate, the way I see it, is that at the end, it's an industry or sector that is essential need for commerce, industries, and I would say for everyone. And for sure, it will have a recovery probably sooner than most industries. The question is what are going to be the new spaces needs? And for example, before this lockdown, in my case, I did not practice home office. It was something I thought it was not for me. And now it seems to work. And for sure, I will practice it or do it at least once a week. And considering that, we could see that would be a 20% free space that it's going to be in my office if I practice that home office in the future. And also it's going to be translated in savings. So probably the industries, corporates and companies, and also individuals will have to do some space adjustments in the short term. And also we can see this in the e-commerce. It's being used by almost everyone, overcoming fears to technology. And this will also be translated in less retail space, but probably more warehouses and space for logistic companies. So things are going to change, but nobody really knows how. This could generate great opportunities, but also it's going to be really challenging for all of us. Thank you.
Of course it will be. Thank you, Agustín. Well, now I will leave you with my partner, Juan Manuel Álvarez del Castillo, for the next topic. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Gerardo. My name is Juan Manuel Álvarez, and I lead the intellectual property practice of the firm. So who are the winners and losers during this pandemic crisis? Let's start from the fact that most of the traditional points of sale of goods and services are closed, and people remain skeptical about living confinement. Certainly, a negative complex business-wise combination and even a vicious circle. And as the traditional ways in which we acquire products and services will probably be changing forever, e-commerce and digital marketing are no longer schemes of the future. They are our present and our new normal. However, several solutions are available for companies to continue operations, ranging from labeling changes, boosting their online offerings and IT capabilities, to brand reconfiguration and the development of new products and services. Understanding the complexity of the commercial and legal impacts caused by the current pandemic will surely enable companies to successfully sail through these troubled waters. For instance, how the pharma, beauty, personal care, and food delivery services respond by creating new business and products much needed for this crisis, allowing the intellectual property rights to live longer online and through the vast social network world is crucial for previewing a faster reincorporation of the companies to this new normal. I now defer to Juan Pablo Malfavón from Zéneca, Maurin Pérez de León from Unilever, and Francisco Pinilla from Uber Eats to provide us their insights and business perspectives. Juan Pablo?
Thank you. Thank you, Juan Manuel. As you mentioned, we're going to have several changes, I believe, in the near future. And after this pandemic, the pharmaceutical industry in general, I mean, the companies, we had to modify the business model overnight. I mean, as you know, most of our promotion is been done face-to-face with the physicians. We have our sales reps going to see the doctors and promote our products, and we had to adapt that activity and to start having virtual meetings with doctors. That was one of the first challenges, and of course we also share information with the physicians, and in terms of intellectual property, we needed to ensure having the proper consents and reviewing from the legal perspective those kind of interactions and the information that was provided during the promotion. It was the same thinking about this kind of seminars and the other continuous education with physicians. We couldn't stop, for instance, launching new products or new indications. This is in the case of AstraZeneca. We continue doing those kind of events using this kind of channels, Zoom or any other important channel. And this is an example, I think, that is important, and the importance of adapting your business model and to be agile in order to continue doing business in terms of promoting and of course ensuring a good scenario for your business. Well, I think those are the comments in general. Now we need to see how we're gonna go back to our workplace, and I believe we had very good comments from our real estate colleagues, and we need to see if we're going to have the same kind of workspace, or if it needs to be changed. And in terms of, and going back perhaps to your comments, Juan Manuel, I believe that more than ever, the pharmaceutical industry and the research of getting a new vaccine or a new treatment for this kind of threats, I mean, for the humankind, is going to be valued, and we need, of course, to reinforce the protection of this kind of intellectual property assets of the industry, not only the pharmaceutical industry. I believe it's important to ensure having the protection to this kind of rights that we have, and continue, of course, with the research and development of new products.
Thank you, Juan Pablo. Very interesting remarks indeed. So now, Maurin, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Juan. I think this is a very interesting topic and vary from industry to industry. In our case, we are seeing some changes in the consumer habits. As I already mentioned, people are consuming less shampoo or styling because we are not socializing anymore, but are consuming more foods and also ice cream. A lot of ice cream as requesting by the Amazon and Rappi. A lot of foods and this kind of thing is changing the way that we are seeing our business. We are launching some of sanitizing products under our brand Rexona, and also we are highlighting the claims on our products related to hygiene and nutrition. So I think we need to reshape the business and our strategies to these new habits, and to be ready for the new normal, that whatever that will be, we need to be ready and to join the business to readapt all our legal strategies on that regards.
Thank you, Maurin, for your comments. Francisco, please go ahead.
Thank you, Juan. As mentioned by Maurin, this is a really interesting topic, and it's important to highlight the importance of technology and the platform during this COVID crisis. Those companies are allowing us to still having access to important matters like bank accounts, food, entertainment, groceries, clothes, and so on. So try to think about this pandemic occurring 10 years ago, right? And 10 years ago, facing this pandemic at the level is impacting everyone's daily life, it could be a nightmare. So platforms are here to help, mainly on those matters that take a lot of time away from people on a daily life. And we hope that this situation can contribute to having governments understanding better the value technology companies can add to the community in general and create thoughtful regulations around those topics. For example, nowadays we are still need, and AstraZeneca General Counsel can confirm this, we still need prescriptions for a lot of products, right? And we have no regulation in place in most of the countries in the region that could create a digitalization of those prescriptions, avoiding people going to the pharmacy and buying those products. So we're expecting that after this crisis, we will have governments thinking about how we can change the landscape and how we can collaborate better with companies like pharma, like CPGs, etc., to having a word in the one. If we don't need to interact in person and we can reduce some risk, we are here to help. Also, we are expecting that after COVID, we may have some different approaches from, for example, merger and acquisitions, incentivizing those processes. We are still having the region with very slow processes on how we can interact between companies and how we can even buy companies. Processes are still having us waiting for 6 months, 1 year, and you know that in capital markets and in venture capital markets, 1 year is a lot of time. So hopefully after COVID, we may have different conversation with governments, trying to have technologies to other spaces when we have no technology yet, and removing some barriers that could create more issues than the help we are expecting.
You're right, Francisco, thank you. I now leave you with my partner, Adrian del Paso.
Thank you. Well, just to try to wrap up here, as we've been discussing for more than an hour on different, very interesting topics, by the way. And there's been a lot of different valuable insights here. I would just say, at least from my perspective and my own getaways, I would start by saying that there's a lot of information out there, and we as lawyers can be somehow leaded to misinformation and even to misjudgment sometimes. So as a first getaway, I would say, I mean, we need to really make sure of reliable sources and also reliable advice, of course. As Francisco said, I mean, we somehow, despite the lack of regulation, fostering electronic means, I mean, not in all areas, but generally, I would say that as long as we can, we should take advantage of electronic means for doing and doing business. We need to stay calm, of course, and try to not overwhelm in the sea of information that is available, as we said before. And I would start also in that sense also by saying that we usually try to tackle difficult obstacles and challenges by thinking in very complex set of strategies and scenarios. So my old additional takeaway is start from zero, start from the very basics, and then move forward. I mean, it's all usually the best way, at least that works for me. And I mean, and personally, I think we also need to have some time to relax and to enjoy the new normal. I mean, this is what we have, and this is what we will probably have for a long time, and our lives will be changing from now on. So enjoy the moment, and also enjoy your family. Probably you have more time to quality time to have your family with you within the lockdown. So thank you all. This has been a marvelous experience, and I will just ask a few words for each of the extraordinary panel of general counsels, starting with Maurin. Just a few takeaways, Maurin, please. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Adrian. First of all, thank you for this invitation. I think it is very important to be part of this for us in order to share best practices and to share the vision that we have as lawyers on the new normal. Just a few takeaways that helping me to go throughout this pandemic. First of all, to be part of a board of directors that are fully informed and are allowed to take important decisions in a fast way. And also having a very, very engaged legal team that react in a very speed way to provide innovative legal solutions. Also, the automatization of the legal processes, helping us to pass through this pandemic, to sign a lot of contracts through DocuSign, and to enable the business to do their work. To having an open channel with all the areas and the employees to understand what they are feeling, what they are experiencing in the street, and what are their main concerns. If I could resume this pandemic and this lockdown, I could say that I am classified in 3 stages. The first of it is how to survive. How can we protect our employees, our business, how we will reset the business to revive, and how we thrive through this pandemic. I am sure if we focus on these 3 stages, we will pass through this pandemic and will be better business and better lawyers. Thank you.
Thank you, Maurin. Great intervention. Juan Pablo, what are your final takeaways?
We all need to be prepared to be adaptable. That's we need to ensure business continuity and to see the way to of course do it in a fast way. I mean, regardless of the nature of your business, we're going to see changes, and that's a fact. We need to incentive these kind of interactions. As Francisco mentioned, we need also to look for there is a very interesting topic regarding telemedicine. We need to incentive those kind of interactions, but also there is also certain liabilities that we need to tackle. There is no regulations, for instance, for this kind of consultation provided by doctors, and also the patient. They need to know their rights, and also the prescriptions. We need to see the way that can be provided electronically like any other country, and avoid going to hospitals or any physician's office. But in general, things again, fortunately, we have good outside counsels like Ibarra, del Paso y Gallego. This is good, and we can rely on having your support to all these business. But thank you, Adrian, and stay safe.
Thank you, Juan Pablo. Very interesting intervention. I think that resilience in these times is key, and we need, as you say, to adapt to these new times. We'll probably stay forever. And of course, we can, as lawyers, one of the things we are required to do right now is navigate through the complex set of regulations, and even through the complex gray areas that we have in Mexico, which are a lot. So thank you. I'll ask Agustín just to give his final words and takeaways, please.
Yes, well, thank you. And as we all said, things are going to change. And also in the law practice in Mexico, lawyers in Mexico, we have been really skeptic to implement technology in the law practice. And a clear example is that most lawyers in Mexico refuse to use digital signatures like DocuSign and Adobe. And we usually prefer wet ink signatures, but in this lockdown, digital signatures became one of our main resources for business continuity. I think this will be the beginning for a big change. and also in real estate law practice. Probably in a few years, we'll see digital notaries or closing a sale transaction through your phone, probably without even meeting the parties or the owners. And the way I see it is that this situation has been a push for some of us to have more trust on technology in our professional practice and also in general in our lives. So.
Thank you, Agustín. Very interesting. I will now leave the word to Francisco.
Thank you, Adrian. As Agustín mentioned now and in his previous intervention, trying new things is really important, guys. In the case of Uber, for example, since the very beginning, we have been doing a lot of home office. And to be honest, this situation was maybe better for us than others because we were quite prepared on that end. And also on the DocuSign arena. The most of our contracts in the world have been signed by digital method. And so far, we are not facing really important issues with that. So trying new things is really important. This is not the time we saw decades ago. And in the coming years, I think we will be seeing more challenges to tackle. Final remark on this is one of the most important lessons for everyone is including companies. The status quo may change very fast and you need to be ready to adapt yourself and the business you are running. Companies that will survive after COVID will be the ones with more cash, are the ones who has transformed their own business and took difficult decisions, having in their mind the long-term view. And we as councils should support our board of directors and our top management to take those hard decisions because it's the right thing to do. Decisions are difficult to take, but it's the right call. Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you. Great, that's great. Jaime, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Thank you, yes.
Perfect, thank you. I think lessons learned, first of all, recognize that there's a new act of God, which we will have to live through until our friends from the pharmaceutical industry find the treatment or vaccine. But also it's a fact that it's here to stay for, and it will be presented in the future. So my advice would be, lesson learned is like, we must revisit our policies, our insurance, our contracts, business continuity plans, as Agustín was mentioning, our technology, legal systems, such as digital signatures, those kinds of things, dispute resolution mechanisms in order to include protection for these type of events. Also, companies must have a crisis management plan, or at least include this type of situations in set plan, in order to act in an organized, expedite, and an orderly manner. Finally, the business needs to adapt, and top management needs to take hard decisions and very quickly in order to avoid the situation get out of control or bigger. And that's where we in-house counsels must be actively involved in all decisions, including our outside counsels. Finally, I want to thank our law firm, Ibarra del Paso y Gallego, for making this virtual roundtable. I think it was really interesting, and thank you very much for the participation.
Thank you, Jaime. On the contrary, it has been a true honor. And I will just leave the word to Tomás. I think everyone else just spoke about final remarks. Tomás, are you there?
Yep, I'm here. Thank you.
Thanks.
I don't have much to add. I think everyone has said pretty much what needs to be said. I said it before, that this pandemic has forced us to think farther into the future than the time that the pandemic will last. Things are changing, and change is here. Change is good. Alternative work arrangements are here to stay. I'm also thinking in terms of us as in-house counsel. Usually we tend to think in terms of avoiding liability at all costs, and we like to say no all of the time. But in these times, we have to embrace the new now. We have to rethink ourselves, and we have to find ways, instead of saying no, find ways to say, how can we do it, explain the situation, and find ways to achieve what our internal clients want to achieve. All companies have to rethink themselves. I don't think survival depends on cash. Cash is important, but it also depends on ingenuity. You have to change business models. The world is changing right underneath us, and we have to be prepared. And those that are prepared and are able to change and to evolve are the ones that are going to survive, really. So that's pretty much what I have to say. And thank you so much for inviting me to this webinar.
A pleasure, Tomás. Thank you. Very interesting intervention. I agree with you. And I think we as lawyers need to be as practical as possible in these times, as there are a lot of challenges and things need to be resolved in a very expedited way. So, well, just to close, I'll leave you with Carlos Ibarra, and we will be.
Thank you.
And thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. One of my favorite professors back in law school long ago used to tell that it was better to have good judges and magistrates than good procedural statutes. Better to have good contract parties than solid written agreements. Well, in this regard, despite the erratic response from our governments and the shortcomings of our legal framework, society has lived up to a very high standard. And that's what is making the difference. Wrapping up some of the conclusions by our superb panelists today, I'd like to highlight talk to your clients, suppliers, and employees. Work with your counsel. Embrace change. Invest on technology and on any available means for increasing product and service delivery. I want to thank especially to all the Latin American law firms that assisted us in the preparation of this comprehensive study, which will be available together with this roundtable and the PowerPoint presentation in our website. And thank you very much to our audience and to our superb panelists. Thank you very much from Pablo, Maurin, Tomás, Francisco, Agustín, and Jaime. Thank you very much for being with us. Stay safe and take care of yourself. Thank you.